Welcome to the Sleeping Barber Podcast.
Hey, it's time for the PostPod with Mark and V. Is this a new thing we do?
I don't know, but I keep thinking about singing and then like the PostPod.
Something's in there. The one thing I have to say is I'm famished. We were talking about like diets the whole time. I am hungry, man.
I had a little muffin beforehand and I've just been chewing on my coffee for the morning conversation, so I've been okay.
Good on you, my friend.
That conversation seemed to hit a couple nerves for you.
Oh, yeah. We had an outline, everybody. We didn't stick to the outline. Let me just say that. But it's absolutely, I think there's some things, and you probably could tell from the questions I'm asking, some relative frustrations that we as practitioners operate in, right? And then intuitively, and we'll share the image with everybody. You'll see it on YouTube. We'll probably propped it up. But the reality is like this media diet pyramid that Ben was talking about, it's quite intuitive because it's a reframing of a lot of the channels that we've come to appreciate and purchase and whatnot, but in a very different visual way that I think can help with storytelling internally a lot more and identify the why it lives where it lives. And, the prioritization of walled gardens. Walled garden has a negative connotation. Mm-hmm. The reality is, though, they're walled garden because of the reach that they have with audiences. Mm-hmm. And they've invested in their own capabilities, their own toolkits, where it makes sense to make sure that you are investing in those spaces as much as possible. Mm-hmm. Again, if you want to prioritize like the attention economy or attention, it's likely where you're going to get that. Right. So a lot of it resonated with me as I'm a practicing media practitioner right now for the organization I represent. And I think there's a lot of things that we can be doing a little bit differently and outright, showcasing like, where does retail media fit? Where does linear, and if you see on the pyramid, like linear and streaming is one now. They're not separate. It's one. And it's about 20 to 25% of your budget, for example, right? So I really like this. And I think there's something here where it helps with internalization and storytelling on the how and the why you've approached things the way you have.
Yeah. Especially it to me seems like one of those things where, what about retail media? Or, what about like CTV? Or, what about like, and so, and then you have this without a defined approach and a principled approach and perspective on how to use media. It becomes one of those like, it's another burning fire. I got to put it out. Exactly. As opposed to like, no, we've thought about this. Here's the plan. When we have enough budget or time or whatever the thing is, this is how we would scale up what we're doing. But it starts with the base, and we need to have the base as a part of everything we're doing. And then you kind of work up from there as opposed to having a knee-jerk reaction to
absolutely
somebody go, this is the latest, greatest thing that's come out, and we have to do something about it.
Absolutely. And the thing is, there's still space for, I know he used the term more rigid, but I'm just going to call it more traditional media. Mm-hmm. It's outdoor, radio, audio, etc., cinema. Like there's still place for that. But I think it's just inverse in the way that you think about it. At the end of the day, we as practitioners, we're constantly fighting this like reach versus frequency battle, right? And when you've fragmented your buy across all these different channels, controlling those two things becomes quite difficult because you're never controlling them holistically as the campaign. You try to navigate them within each platform a little bit differently, right? So when you can prioritize, say, for example, Google and its ad suite, when you can prioritize Meta and its ad suite, you can get closer to a universal frequency capping or reach target, et cetera, versus when you're moving in the more traditional way where you're buying, audio, TV in a traditional sense, where that becomes the outlier. But when your majority of your budget's tied up in there, it's hard to do that effectively, essentially is what I'm saying. So I don't know. There's a lot of the conversation resonated with me as, like I said, we're approaching Q4 right here. Right now, there's a whole bunch of campaigns that coming to market, not only for us, but I'm sure many advertisers. And it's one of those things that it's constantly playing in the back of your head. It's like, have I set it up the right way? Is it going to set me up for Black Friday, Cyber Monday?
Yeah. The example of YouTube was interesting. I mean, even saying it, there's some amount of education depending on the size of the company you're at, like saying Meta. And then what do you mean by Meta? Because it could be Facebook, it could be WhatsApp, it could be, Google, same thing, but they call out YouTube specifically on the pyramid. But YouTube is a weird one. It is funny because it's social, but it's not really social. And but you can also buy TV. And so it's TV, but connected TV and not, you know what I mean?
Totally.
And so then there's also the video requirement, obviously,
Yeah.
for YouTube. And so it doesn't fit into like quite the box. And so thinking about how to use it, but also you've got, when it comes to attention, you know, on a regular pre-roll, like you've got 5 seconds guaranteed, which is unlike most other channels. And so there's a whole bunch of things there that have creative implications.
Absolutely.
When you're thinking about the planning around this.
I wish we had more time. I wanted to get into measurement a little bit on the, you know, MMM side, multi-touch attribution, et cetera, just kind of see what his thoughts were on that. But, you know, at the end of the day, the shift that we're seeing, we talked about search. We talked about, you know, make sure we're prioritizing brand. I don't want to say it's not new because like we've been talking about it for at least 3 years, and there's more and more literature that supports this notion. I just want to be very careful in saying like when we're talking about search, we know search is being disrupted, but let's not forget like Google still owns just under 90% of total impression of total share from a browser perspective as well, and search is still a very dominant part of the ecosystem. I think what has to change is how you perceive search, and I think you did a great job of this. It's like search is not advertising. Search is basically creating and establishing a shelf space where people are looking for products or a category. That's what it does. And it's great because it can help keep you top of mind when someone's already made some level of decision what they're looking for. So it's a reassurance more so than a driver of acquisition in a traditional sense. And I think that's the important takeaway. Like you can't fund search in absence of brand.
Yeah. His takeaway too, that's a good point about search. His takeaway on organic and where I was going with SEO, right? Like SEO is such a black box. And so it's hard. And he did a really good job at explaining it. Like, you know, they put up these rules but they don't tell you what they are. And then you're chasing after trying to uncover what those are.
Totally.
Same thing with all the algorithms on social channels. But I appreciate his comment about the one thing you should do to better understand attention is to use organic social. And it's a new perspective for me because like I've almost dismissed it from an advertiser perspective because it's hard and you can spend so much time and energy there and get zero results. But if you take it from a point of view of discovery of what the algorithms are looking for and the platforms are looking for to give you the attention, then that's a different approach. It almost, it fits into some kind of an innovation box almost in the media. I don't know if this is actually how they think of it, but an innovation box in the media diet, because you're trying to understand what it is that makes the machine work. And it doesn't have to necessarily be costly to do that. I don't think it's the base, but I do think it's a part of the plan.
I agree. Completely agree. Often, and this is where, again, I don't want to say it was a little bit triggering, but like you have these organic social teams that live outside of media teams.
Yeah.
They're under social care. They're under, you know, a completely different working team that's more tied to PR and some of these other areas. So I think when there's naturally they're removed from the traditional marketing, it's harder to, you know, engage and find that commonality because they're building their own organic calendars. They're building their own ways of thinking and working and prioritizing different messaging than maybe what you are from a marketing perspective.
Yeah.
And it's just by structure, right? It's not to their, I'm actually defending them, but I think like this is where sometimes organizations get in their own way.
Yeah. Well, when I think about when we worked together, I had social, including organic, and we called it digital at the time.
Yeah.
Which was mostly, there was a big chunk of that was search.
Yeah.
And display, I think, was a part of that, right?
Yeah. Programmatic was there.
Programmatic. So yeah, like I suspect the more division you have, the more you have your individual departments that are fighting for their own budget. Trying to prove value as opposed to seeing the whole picture. And so everybody's going to, when it comes time for budget season also, which is coming up, you have all these competing interests because they're trying to justify their individual roles, their contributions and all that kind of stuff, rather than looking at the whole thing holistically and saying, it's not necessarily we think you're doing a bad job. It's just that, you know, what are we overall achieving for the company?
Especially as budgets are being crushed. you have to go back to the well and be like, okay, well, what organic means do I have at my disposal to try to drive awareness around whatever the goal is? Like, is it a campaign? Is it a moment? Whatever. And this is where an entire ship needs to kind of start rowing or going in the same direction. Where right now, I think a lot of us are suffering from competing agendas. People have different opinions. We know already how subjective our discipline is, and everyone can have their own informed opinion based on their own experiences. And it makes it harder to get everybody on the same.
Even as you said, organic reach, like the PR team's often adjacent, comms team is often adjacent and living outside of marketing departments, which also conflates things a bit. Yeah, if you're looking to squeeze the most blood out of a rock or whatever the expression is, like you need to have a cohesive plan in place for a lot of these things, especially in Q4. Like there's just not enough resources to go around.
Show me your media plan for Q4 and I'll tell you how cohesive your organization is.
Right. Yeah. Any other thoughts that stick out or ideas that stick out for you, V?
I think for me, the conversation just around like the attention versus impression, I think there's a lot of value in that and understanding. I think for me is getting really tight on how you define attention, how you opt to measure that. Because again, I think there's a difference here of attention versus like chasing like fame or chasing virality, if you will. Like going viral is not, I know it's always been something everyone wants to do. However, we know that likely doesn't always translate to actual business outcomes, but maximizing attention in a moment with the right message, I think obviously that's something you need to be investing in. But honestly, there's so much testing that you have to do to get to that point to make an informed decision. I would argue to start testing it and seeing what works for your brand, your organization. Yeah, for me, looking at it from a different lens and just not thinking about it through a traditional like impression. Like we had over 70 million impressions in the campaign.
Yeah.
Okay. What does that mean?
And
and right. So, and prioritizing somewhat attention. That's why like my question around creators is like, how does that fit into this?
Right.
Because I would argue attention economy came from creators originally.
Yeah. I saw Jenny Romanek post something about that. I think she was trying to find a better word than influencers. And it was something like media partners. Okay. I'm not saying exactly the way she said it, but it was something to that effect, where there are people that have media reach. And when you partner with them, it's part of what you're getting out of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. The one thing that stuck out for me too is also just the talk around MarTech and the amount of investments going there. And I loved his comment about like a lot of people get halfway in, but they're just as far in as they are out of it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And never close the loop on that.
Absolutely.
It's really difficult because there's so much there that you want to do with the tech.
Yeah.
But then the cost of it, unless you can go all the way in, like it's a giant drain on marketing budgets for sure. I'm not just in marketing. I'm sure the departments have this as well. And so if your objective is really to get attention, I think it's, to Ben's point, like if you have my email for 10 years and you've never done anything other than email me with it, I'm not getting those. So what are you doing?
Absolutely. Tech debt is real. And again, just like everything else in our discipline, you'll have people that will come in that have experience with specific products, specific technologies, and they'll want to bring it in because it's what they're familiar with. But a lot of organizations don't do a good enough job in actually assessing or doing audits of their infrastructure. What do we have across the organization? Do we have multiple? One business unit may want a CRM. It's like, well, we probably have a CRM somewhere in this organization. It's like, no, we'll just do our own, we'll kick off our own process and we'll get that approved and we'll just go. And again, that innately is taking away from media facing dollars. And people don't realize that. And when you think about all the different tech that people start and stop, and like to Ben's point, you get to that, first, second base, but you never actually round all the bases. It just over time, it just accumulates until someone says, hey, why are we giving X vendors so much money?
Yeah.
It's like, didn't even know we had it.
Totally.
It's a real thing.
It's a real huge thing.
Anyways, Ben, if you're still listening, thank you so much for sharing your time with us and your insights. Greatly appreciated. I know listeners will get a lot out of this as we approach Q4.
Yeah. And thank you, listener, for keeping us in your ears.
Yeah. You keep coming back and we love it. We see it in the stats. We see it in the data. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, V. We'll talk to you soon.
Have a good one.